I'll go ahead and just welcome everybody that's on the call this month. It's good to have you all back from your month off for the summer. I hope it's been a wonderful summer for everybody in spite of certain circumstances. Father Theophany, please, will you start us off with a prayer?
Of course. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Christ our God, thank you for bringing us together tonight and for all of your blessings in our lives. Please, Lord, help us and guide us to learn from each other so that we can learn to better follow you and serve you and to do everything for your glory. For yours is the kingdom and the power and the glory of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, now and forever into the ages of ages. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Father.
Thank you.
Okay, Father Theophany has turned over a little bit of the host duties to me, but I'm really going to go ahead and turn them over to Myra and Owen, who will introduce tonight's presenters. Please, if you will.
Okay. We're pleased to have tonight two people from Saints Peter and Paul in Glenview. I got to know their story during the parish outreach phase, and another member of Strength and Stewardship Now was with me, and we talked to the parish, and as a result of that, I thought they had some interesting, based on my experience at least, innovative ideas. Chris Atsaves is, I believe, just about president, vice president, treasurer, and stewardship chair at St. Peter and Paul at some point. And he is also a chanter and athletic director there. So that just about covers it. He is a wealth advisor and senior vice president in the private client group at UBS. Voula has her MBA from DePaul and has been working in, or did work in the banking industry, where she had the opportunity to work with local not-for-profit organizations. And that experience, I'm sure, has been very valuable to her in working with her parish. She currently is a parish council member and the current stewardship chair. She has been vice president, treasurer, assistant treasurer, and corresponding secretary. So they both have a lot of experience on the financial side and in working with their parish. Take it, Chris and Voula. Thank you for being here. You're on mute, Chris.
How's that? Is that better? So I just had to move locations because I found out I was in the parish library and there's another meeting scheduled in there. So now I'm sitting in a hallway at the church. So if it gets a little bit noisy, I apologize, but I will do my best to kind of shield most of the noise. So today we wanted to chat a little bit about festivals, the history at St. Peter and Paul of not only doing festivals, but we feel we're a little bit unique because we've never used proceeds from our festival for our operating budget. So the proceeds have always gone to our capital projects. And most recently, we've decided that we are going to donate 30% of our proceeds to local charities. So I wish I could take credit for that, but we kind of inherited that process from Father George Schoolis, who was the proistamenos here at St. Peter and Paul for 25 plus years before his passing. And Father George built a wonderful stewardship program for the parish. And all, it's kind of our responsibility to kind of keep that going. Now, don't get me wrong. St. Peter and Paul did a major Greek picnic, just like almost every other parish in the past. We had big carnival rides, you know, just like everybody else. We tried to do whatever we could to attract as many people to come. I've been on the board since 2004. And again, the edict back then was that none of the proceeds from the church Greek Fest were going to be used for our operating budget. So we would raffle off a car, just like almost every other parish does too, where you have a raffle. Every year, approximately 50 to 70% of the proceeds would come from the raffle. So it was kind of deemed as almost an insurance policy. It kind of protected the parish against bad weather. You know, gosh forbid you had 3 days of rain and all of your preparations and all of the tents and chairs and grills and everything that you had to go rent was a big washout. So the raffle was kind of used as the insurance policy for the parish, just to ensure that we wouldn't lose any money. So I want to say it was either 2006 or 2007. One of our parishioners at a General Assembly meeting, the parishioner was a former founder of the parish, got up and said that, or made the suggestion that the parish stop doing raffles. Raffles were deemed as a game of chance, and we shouldn't be promoting gambling at our parish by doing raffles. So it kind of took the parish council by surprise, and we tabled the motion until the next meeting. At the next meeting, again, it was brought up and it was put to a vote and it was approved. No more raffles at St. Peter and Paul. So no more insurance policy for Greek Fest, which was kind of a shock to us. We continued with an outdoor Greek festival. It turned more into a food fest like most of the other parishes are currently doing. Less carnival rides, less overhead, because we didn't have the protection any longer. So for 2 years, we continued to do Greek Fest outside. One year we netted $28,000 in profit in the Greek Fest, and we actually blew a major electrical fuse here inside of the parish because we were sucking all of the electricity outside, and it was about a $9,000 repair. So when it was all said and done, it was about $18,000 worth of profit. And parish council kind of deemed that it didn't make any sense any longer to continue to do a Greek festival if there weren't going to be major proceeds, or if there wasn't a way for the parish to protect itself. So for the next 10 years, we didn't have a Greek festival. Our stewardship didn't suffer. We were able to make our stewardship numbers, but we didn't have a Greek festival. And what we found was during that 10-year hiatus, where we did not have a festival any longer, it left a big void in our parish. It left a void among our parishioners. The fellowship and camaraderie of parishioners working side by side together in cooking, in cutting meat and skewering and, you know, cutting pastries, serving ice cream, hot dogs, I mean, whatever we served, that camaraderie and that fellowship was missing. We were also hearing from many of the residents of Glenview who were not Greek, but always came to our Greek Fest. They were always commenting on, when are we going to have our Greek festival again? They missed it just as much as we missed it. So our community missed it, and the Glenview community also suffered. So we decided in 2014 or 2015 to try it again. This time we were going to do it on a small scale, just to see what type of volunteers we can get and what it would look like. So we kind of brought Greek Fest back, but it was indoors. It was just a food fest, and we served food in our gymnasium. Now, we were able to seat approximately 280 people in our gymnasium. We cooked outside, but we served indoors, just to protect us against inclement weather, where we weren't able, to net any kind of proceeds. And it actually worked out great. It brought a lot of fellowship back to the parish. Parishioners were excited, to barbecue again, to be in the kitchen, cooking rice, cooking souvlaki, doing everything that we had done in the past. And the momentum kind of grew. We were able to gain more volunteers. We did it again next year, but we did it again in a small scale, where we cooked outside and we served in our gymnasium, just food. So then, after 2 years of having kind of an indoor food fest, we decided, okay, now it's time to try to bring it outside again. We had some issues because, again, we were taking kind of a smaller food fest and turning it into a major, picnic for the benefit of not only our parish, but the Glenview community and some other parishes. We had some issues. How much food should we order? We had no idea how many people to expect. What were we going to do with parking? Right? We used to shuttle people from Loyola Academy, which is just up the street, from New Trier High School. We used to shuttle people on buses back and forth and on trolleys back and forth. We couldn't do that any longer. We decided that, we were going to use our parking lot for parking, and we were going to use the half of our parking lot for our Greek Fest. So we set up tables, we barbecued, people came, and it was fun. We had some entertainment. And then we kind of got the costs and it kind of turned into a discussion on pros and cons. So again, we needed the health department, we needed permits, we had to have some police and some police security. Unfortunately, they charged us for their security. So at one of our parish council meetings, our new proistomenos at the time was Father Panayoti Basnos, and he made this suggestion, well, what if we gave some of our proceeds to charity? What if we helped our Glenview community with some philanthropic endeavors. And Voula, a little bit later, will go through some of the people and some of the organizations that we donated some money to. So it was kind of a precedent where we were able to take our proceeds and give some of them away. We decided at a parish council meeting that we would give 30% of our proceeds away. But the most important thing was that our camaraderie, our fellowship among our parishioners and our community came back. And it came back really strong with vengeance, because our stewardship program, we believe, is strong enough to stand on its own. And it's our job as a stewardship committee, and Voula will touch upon this a little bit later as well. It's our job as a stewardship committee to build strength through fellowship and through communication with our parish. So whenever we do a fundraising type of an event, we usually earmark what the proceeds are going to be used for before we even do the event. So as the athletic director, we used to have a golf outing here at St. Peter and Paul many years ago. That stopped for about 10 years. And again, we were asked by our parishioners to bring back the fellowship and bring back the golf outing. So 8 years ago, we brought back the golf outing. Again, we used the proceeds. We stated in our marketing material that all the proceeds are going to be used for athletics and for our youth programs. We don't advertise it to other churches, just within our own parish, because the goal of this outing is to promote fellowship. So if you think about the athletic programs, and for those of you that are in parishes that participate in basketball and participate in the Junior Olympics, we don't charge any of our parishioners to participate in basketball. We don't charge any of our parishioners to participate in the Junior Olympics. We buy uniforms for all of our kids. We buy the uniforms for the Junior Olympics. And the proceeds from the golf outing are used to support that. So again, our goal is to kind of have our stewardship program stand on its own. We don't really want to nickel and dime our parishioners by doing massive amounts of fundraisers to raise funds, because we believe that if you support the parish, you support the philanthropy, you support the fellowship, and you support the community, that the money will follow. So that's kind of what, my goal today was, to just kind of show an example of a parish that doesn't use Greek Fest proceeds for its operating budget. So, Voula, you kind of want to take over from here and kind of give a little spiel about our stewardship program?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thanks, Chris. And to recap what Chris mentioned, and from what I've been told about the history of the Greek Fest proceeds at St. Peter and Paul, we've never used the Fest proceeds for operational expenses. And the proceeds of the Fest have typically been restricted to capital account needs. Since the Fest returned, our former priest and one parish council member were the catalysts for apportioning 30% of the net Fest proceeds for external philanthropic purposes. As I've listed here, some of the nonprofit recipients include Wagner Farms, which is a property that is across the street from our church. And we use their facilities every now and again, and we have an agreement with them to use our parking lot to the north, we have a nice relationship with basically our neighbors. Several other nonprofits that were selected to receive donation from our church included the Glenview Youth Services, OCMC, and OCF. So all the events that we plan are planned by the individual ministries, and we have a very long list of ministries at our church. So there's always something for that'll meet somebody's needs. The proceeds are typically earmarked for specific purposes, including the Glendy that we have is typically earmarked for the Agape preschool. The men's social goes for philanthropic to philanthropic organizations. And as Chris mentioned, his own baby, the golf outing is earmarked for the youth and athletics at our church. So a little note that I wanted to point out at the bottom of this slide is that stewardship isn't involved with the planning of these events. Granted, there are individuals on the stewardship ministry that also volunteer their efforts in other ministries. But it's important to note that each individual ministry carries out their own event planning. So a common theme that I wanted to point out and call out on this very red slide is that it really only takes one voice to make a difference. So I recently read this quote by Diana Hardy, and the quote says, "It only takes one voice at the right pitch to start an avalanche." And that sentiment really does apply to our own church community. And I think it can apply to everyone in one way or another. Now, we're sharing the story of Saints Peter and Paul, and it's one example, and it might not work for everyone. But I think it's important to note that between our priest, parish council, and parishioners, during whatever avenues there might be, maybe it's an email or somebody standing up during an assembly and making a comment or bringing up an idea, that it really only takes one person in order to make a change. So this has kind of been my baby, if you will, with respect to a strategic shift that we've had in thinking from capital giving to annual giving. I was involved in the capital campaign that started about 3 years ago now, and that evolved into wanting to move away from nickel and diming, as Chris mentioned, of our parishioners. And so how did we accomplish this shift? And it's a big change. We're normally used to having a stewardship campaign and also a capital campaign. Well, we decided to, as I just want to explain how it was done. I was asked to, as the capital campaign committee co-chair, or maybe I was the chair at the time, there was some change as well in that capital campaign committee. I was asked, since I was on council, to present this idea to the parish council, and we really just thought, instead of coming to the parishioners with all sorts of different expenses that we might need for that given year, whether it included a capital project or all the other operating expenses that we budget out for the year, why not just have one ask? So that way we're maintaining a certain level of giving over the years and being able to accomplish capital projects and not have to create a special ministry to do that. So I coined this equation, if you will: stewardship equals capital projects plus operational expenses. And so we accomplished this shift in giving by being consistent with our message. And we continue to communicate this equation in our newsletters, and soon it's been a labor of love, a 2-year revamp of our stewardship web pages. And this information shared includes updates on all of our capital projects. So the parishioners know that the last 2 years we've had 2 major projects, both having to do with renovating the roofs and HVACs of our community center and also of our sanctuary. So let's see. So just to reiterate, and something that I've also learned through all the Stewardship Now monthly calls, is that we've really focused our relationship with our parishioners. And so really the money is following, and the way we've measured that really is just from what our bookkeeper has been sharing with the Stewardship Committee and Parish Council. So average stewardship has increased by over 30% from at the end of 2020 as compared to 2018, when all of this sort of was at the start, at the start of the strategic shift. And the combination of stewardship and capital occurred about mid-2019. So I would have to say that even through the pandemic and all the challenges that each individual family might be facing, or say someone is in a more fixed income type point in their life versus somebody else who might own their own business and had other challenges throughout the year. We have really seen our stewardship receipts grow. It has been, how do I say this? I'm just really proud of our ministry, of our church, of what we're able to accomplish, because when we come together, we're able to do good. And honestly, it's the future for our children. And so that's what makes me passionate about, volunteering and also wearing the stewardship hat. And so if anyone has any questions, now would be a great time to raise your hand. That's
I was going to say,
all.
well, I'm happy to moderate anything that gets put into the chat too. I don't see anything there yet. I do have a question for you, and I see a raised hand, but will you just give us perspective on your parish, size, number of stewards, that sort of thing?
Yes, I think we're about 600 stewards. I think that kind of covers the size. Any other question on that front?
Annual, if you want to share, I'm always curious what a parish's annual budget is, but
yes, that's a good question. I should know that number at the top of my head, but I think we're somewhere around 750,000 for our operating expenses, but we've been tacking on what our capital project is for the year, so it's taking us kind of closer to the $1 million+ mark, depending on which year it is. Yeah.
So our parish has 2 full-time priests, a priest domino and a second priest. Our parish also has hired a separate youth director. So we have a separate youth director on staff, and we also have a parish administrator. So, there's 4 salaries along with all of the other operating expenses. We have a separate bookkeeper, which is a 5th salary that we support. So it's a little bit unique because what we found and what was really frustrating for our, building of our youth program is that the second priest was always kind of deemed in charge of the youth program. The second priest would be here for a year, maybe 2 years, and then get assigned somewhere else. Somebody else would come in and kind of have to start that relationship with our youth all over again. So we made it a separate point to hire our own separate youth director, which we did during a pandemic. So we weren't afraid to have an outlay of a salary during a, kind of a challenging time, because we figured that the parish would respond, and so far our numbers kind of show that the parish has responded in a positive fashion.
Thanks, Chris. Voula, I don't know if you can see in the chat, George Lattice is asking if you happen to know the median stewardship, is the average skewed because of a large donor giver?
I don't have a median number in front of me. However, any sort of large donation is put into a separate line item. So it's not taken into account when that average is calculated. I know that for a fact because I also had the same question. And I noticed that there were several different GL accounts or general ledger accounts that are used. So,
okay. And then Peter Petsavis is asking, how has the median and top 3 mode changed during that time period?
yeah, so the trend is that people are, and we see different brackets or tiers of giving. So we have that information, and the number of donors have not only increased in each of those buckets, but shifted slightly more towards the higher brackets. And I really, it's hard to know without actually surveying the folks, but I really think the message is being consistently used. And the message is really that we're doing all these major capital projects right now, which is wrapped up into our stewardship giving. There will not be a separate capital campaign ask. And so that is, honestly, I think it's with the strategic shift has helped with respect to the demand of the volunteers that we need as well, because we are not trying to accomplish the same thing, but in 2 different buckets. So I think it's going forward, it will continue to improve as far as the average stewardship amounts as more and more people get used to the reason why we're asking for an increase in the stewardship receipts.
Okay, and your stewards understand that their gifts, their donations are a combination of stewardship and capital campaign donation together. How do you communicate that? I'm just curious.
Yes. Most of the time we have at least 1 to 2 pages in our newsletter, and that's something that we mention nearly monthly. And also revamping the website. During the pandemic, it started petering out recently, but we had virtual fellowship hours. That was, anytime somebody hears stewardship, they always think of money. And I realized that when I was calling parishioners that stewardship has that kind of connotation. But the more I was receptive to just being open about saying hello and I'm not asking for anything in return, then people opened up really. And unlike Chris, I've been in the parish for maybe 12 years now, married 9 in the parish. And so I don't know as many people, but it's such a warm parish, and so just having this opportunity to be able to talk to everyone on the phone as opposed to when you go down to coffee hour, which the stewardship committee is also hosting this coming Sunday. It's finding the opportunities to continue the message, and something I'm going to try and get involved with is all hands ministry meetings, and making sure that while we might not be involved in planning the events, at least the message would be consistent. Maybe it's a couple of points of, continuing the stewardship message in all of the communications.
Yeah, so we try to be as consistent as we can with that message throughout all of our ministries. Just recently, over the last 6 to 8 weeks, we stopped passing trays, during liturgy and after liturgy, just to kind of be consistent with the message that it's just going to be one ask, and we ask parishioners. So, for example, when a parent comes up to me during basketball and says, well, how much is it? We say that, there's no charge for basketball, but all that we ask is that if you have a good experience, please consider increasing your stewardship. So almost every ministry is kind of guided by a very similar theme. And we think that consistency is very important.
There are a couple of overlapping questions. One was a direct message to me, so I'm just going to sort of read it out loud. And how do you
Please.
communicate? I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was saying, go ahead, please.
Okay. How do you communicate what percentage of the ask will be given to capital expenses projects and what percentage to the operational fund? Well, I had a feeling this question was going to come up and I should have preempted it with an answer, but I'm glad it was asked. It's a very gray area, right? So this is all sort of new. When I started with the capital campaign, we had a couple of different assessments. One was like the needs and wants of the parish, like all the different projects we were interested in completing. And then we developed it even further using an architectural firm, what sorts of ROM or rough order of magnitude were these particular projects cost us. So it was a little bit more in depth, some architectural drawings and what have you. The idea was to prioritize those particular projects amongst either the executive committee or parish council. But these first two projects were really a need, right? So the roof, there's water and all this stuff happening, and it was the most urgent need that we had to repair. So going forward, I would say, we already had some reserves, even from the prior capital campaign that was over maybe a decade plus ago at this point. And so that money kind of came together from a couple different places, whether it was we already had the capital monies restricted and we were able to use those funds. So I would say percentage is not really something that we've discussed just yet, but it's going to, we're going to need to figure out how to make sure that first our operational expenses are covered, and then any sort of philanthropic and capital projects are also able to be met for that year. And obviously we have to approach the assembly should, if we're surpassing a certain dollar threshold for some of these projects. So there's going to be a lot of questions, and we'll be very thorough about how that's.
Well, here's kind of how we envision the process working. So for example, if our stewardship goal, just to meet our operational expenses, and I'm just going to throw a number out because I don't know it offhand, let's say it's $800,000, and we happen to raise $875,000 that year. The goal is to take the extra $75,000 and put it into a capital fund. The following year, if we exceed our stewardship goal number, we take the excess and we keep building a capital fund for future projects. This way, whenever there's a project or something that is in need, we don't have to pass the hat, call parishioners, ring doorbells in order to raise money for capital. The goal is to slowly build a capital fund that we could tap into and use whenever there's a project needed or a project wanted. So that's kind of the goal of how we hope it's going to work. Again, we're kind of in our infancy, with our new formula, and, we have seen a little bit of an increase in the average steward as far as contributions go. But, with 2020 kind of being a shutdown pandemic, and now the reopening, and then, we're going to revisit exactly from a percentage standpoint how that's going to work. But that's the vision of our home.
Willa, did you want to take any of the other questions in chat? Did you have a chance to look at them?
I want to make sure I don't miss any, but I'm going to go from the most recent. We'll work our way up. So Myra asked, what persuaded the parish council initially to give a percentage of proceeds to philanthropy? I don't think it was parish council. I think I mentioned that it was our former priest and one of the parish council members that was co-chairing the fest. Chris, if you know more about that than I do.
Yeah, that was basically it. I mean, to kind of support the community, because the community has supported our Greek fest. So, the goal was to kind of support the community and become more of a part of our local community than just part of our local parish. So it gives us the ability to branch out even further into the community.
Before we go to Elizabeth's question, Father Jim Corderas has been waiting patiently with his hand up. Father
Thank
Jim,
you, Stacy.
please.
Two things, Voula and Chris, congratulations on this. There's something that always drives me crazy in parishes when every ministry and department it has their own checkbook, and everybody's raising their own money, and everybody's, you have all these people coming at you when you walk into church. You may have $100 or so dollars in your pocket, and it's all gone when you leave, and you're still the steward, and you want to. But what we end up doing is holding back on our stewardship because we know about all these things we're going to get hit up for. But what you did, and it's a hard process to get those people to give up their checkbooks, because everybody wants to raise funds and they don't see it the way you do. So that's a real. I didn't want to let that slip by without calling attention to it. That's really an ideal way to organize your ministries and have it be one checkbook, one fundraising, and one stewardship, and you're done. That way people give freely, knowing they have to plan, right? They have to know how much they're going to give for the year, and they want to be generous, but they also want to give every time somebody asks. So that's really important. The other thing is, I was looking online, and God bless you for using, and not just using the resources of the department, but adapting them to your parish. That's the ideal for us, is we send out templates. We also send out finished copy for parishes don't have talent or resources to fix them. They're fine to use turnkey, but you guys take them and make them better by adapting them to your specific ministries in your parish and what's going on. So that really is encouraging to us here when we put things together and see them to use. So thank you for that.
We're so grateful to be able to leverage all of the tools and all of the items that you have already prepared. We were just in church over the weekend. I was ushering, and I saw the banner of the greatest of these is love. I think is how the passage goes in a very large banner. It's right in between the atrium of the church and the exterior doors. And I'm like, I don't know. I was just very happy that we're able to carry that message. Yeah.
The resources are great. Whenever we write stewardship articles, I mean, it's usually the first place where, we stop to gather some thoughts and ideas. So
right, there's no plagiarism in the church, just so you know.
That's right. That's right.
But the theme last year was because we were going through so much that we wanted to talk about, the greatest these is love and healing. This year we're dealing with the church is your spiritual home, drawing people back to the church, because many places they've gotten used to watching online or not coming at all because of what we've been through. And we need to get them to realize that with the body of Christ is when we're together. So that's our theme this year, is the church, our spiritual home. So just so you can kind of think ahead. So we try to be timely in what we propose for themes. I'm done. That's all. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Oh, good. And there's one question from Dimitri. Katzenberris that I kind of wanted to address. So
Go ahead.
do you suggest a certain stewardship amount and then tithing question mark? So we do have, kind of an earmark where we ask for 2% of the adjusted gross income or $2,000, whichever is greater. So, I mean, our goal is to get every parishioner to contribute $2,000 as a family each to our parish. And if we can do that, we would be able to accomplish all of our future capital needs based on the assessment that we've done, and be able to continue to support operating and grow more ministries and be able to grow closer to our community as well. So the question on tithing, time, talent, and treasure is always, the 3 T's that we always talk about. Somebody who donates money, but, doesn't really participate in the life of the parish, is he really, participating in time, talent, and treasure? I mean, that's an argument that you can always have, but the goal and what we suggest to our parishioners is that every year you increase your stewardship contribution by 10%. So for example, if you gave $1,000, we're asking you to give $1,100 the next year. And then the following year, you'll give $1,200. And over a 10-year period, we're hoping that, that 10% increase will get you closer to what's written biblically, and that's, tithing 10%. So yeah, that is definitely a goal for our parish. And it's a great question. Thanks, Dimitri.
Voula, did you want to address Elizabeth Carney's question?
Yes, and I just typed in our email address if anyone wants to reach out after the event tonight. So I pray that your desire to build a capital fund works well for you. I'm wondering if your parish has an emergency fund, for example, 6 months or so to cover operating expenses, which is probably the way most people try and balance their own personal finances, right? Emergency fund, I don't think we have anything called an emergency fund. However, we do have a lot of, what's the way to call it, Chris?
Yeah, we have excess. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
we keep excess in our, checking account, savings account, and
Checking, savings, mutual funds. There have been some donations that most people will say, well, this donation should be used to cover any sort of debt you have, which we don't have any, thankfully. And so, we'll create a separate fund, and that'll be managed according to our policy and Chris and we have another parish council member that are financial advisors that make sure that we're not being too risky with the way we're investing those monies. But Chris, for example, Chris mentioned that we have a youth director, and one of our former parishioners who passed, her a certain amount of money, endowment funds, thank you, were endowed to our church, and it was a sizable 6-figure number. And so what the council decided was that we would use a portion of, I think it was 50% of the youth director's salary would be covered by this particular fund. So we're finding good uses for the monies that we've been endowed with. And so that's, I would say that this, our example might not be everybody's example. So I would consider, brainstorming and finding ways to create that emergency fund if that's something that your parish needs and provides comfort. Another thing I would say is, coming from a commercial lending background, is, if you need a line of credit from established from a bank, that would be something that would be prudent. You don't have to draw on a line of credit, but you could have it available if any sort of emergencies do arise. I'm no longer in banking, but just another option.
One idea that was in place in my parish in Columbus, Ohio, was because the festival taxes the facility, right? The carpets have to be cleaned, and the kitchen equipment is heavily used. The festival actually each year contributes to a reserve fund for the potential of a piece of equipment breaking down because of excessive use from the festival or another large event like that. And that's a way to build a reserve for capital projects like that. We've been doing that for probably almost 30 years, and it takes some of the strain off of having to ask or fundraise when surprise, surprise, an industrial strength kitchen dishwasher is $30,000 or whatever the price may be. That's just one idea. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any other hands up or questions. We are coming up to the top of the hour.
I'm scrolling just to make sure we didn't miss anyone, but like I said, I have put in the chat the sspp.stewardship@gmail.com email address. So feel free to reach out.
And you know what, even that's a unique idea that I'm going to steal. We don't have a dedicated address to answer stewardship questions. They could be as simple as, my wife and I both considered stewards. There are all kinds of questions out there that come in typically before General Assembly meetings, or when a vote is needing to be taken on something. And having a dedicated email address, I think is a great idea. I don't know why we didn't think of it here, but I'm going to go ahead and steal that idea.
Yeah, we have every ministry has its own separate email address. So I have one for athletics. Voula has one for stewardship. So Keith has a separate one, as he's the parish council president. So every parishioner can reach out and do a one-on-one contact with any of the ministry leaders, which we felt was important as well.
Excellent. Excellent.
Well, thank you for having the two of us.
Yeah, thank you for offering the, these best practices. Myra, Owen, I don't know if you have anything you want to wrap up with. We're going to remind everybody that we're taking October off because of the clergy laity falling so close to when the Strength and Stewardship Now meeting would be held. Anything else I'm missing? Any housekeeping or anything like that?
I don't think so. We do want to thank Chris and Voula. It's been very enlightening and very informative, and we appreciate the time and all of your wonderful ideas. We would like to suggest that if you have not yet signed up for the clergy laity, to please do so. There will be quite a bit of time devoted to stewardship, and our goal, although it's not completely worked out, is to really have discussions among the parishes on best practices, so that ideas that Voula have and Chris have and others on this call, George Lajas and everybody else, don't want to name everybody, it'll be an opportunity to exchange ideas. That is our goal. We're still trying to figure out some of the details on how we'll try to accomplish that. So if you have not yet registered, please do. And we look forward to seeing you in St. Louis. And because there will be quite a lengthy amount of time devoted to stewardship at the clergy laity, we thought, or the Metropolis thought, that we should, skip next month and we'll meet again on the first Tuesday in November in this type of setting. So thank you very much. Thank you, everybody,
Good.
for attending today.
Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
All right. Good night, all.
Thank
Right.
you.
I didn't move fast enough.